All right, can the people on Zoom hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, sounds good. Well, we're gonna get started here. Sorry for the delay. I got caught up in a conversation here. Appreciate you guys being here today. And I'm just looking, I have not used this presentation stuff. Trying to figure out how to get my slides full size. All right. Well, I again apologize. Let's see. Others. I'm an Apple guy. What can I tell you? Anyway, my name is Joe McMahon. I'm a realtor here with Keller Williams Realty South Bay. I've been here just over 2 years, and I've been in the real estate industry for over 7 years. And they asked me to do this segment of Ignite, and I appreciate you guys showing up to be a part of it, whether you're in person or online. And I think this could be one of the more valuable segments that you get out of this program, because getting to the close is a really important thing. I mean, you guys have studied how to get clients, how to market, how to negotiate, how to set expectations, and a lot of that will come together in this presentation today. But I often think of getting to the close. Once you've got a contract accepted and you open escrow, I think it's my job to drag that thing to the finish line. You know, it's like there's going to be a lot of hurdles, there's going to be a lot of interaction, there's going to be a lot of questions. A fair amount of negotiation, and you know, just trying to make sure that you have the highest close ratio possible once you have a contract and are in escrow. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to rely on my manual here a fair amount. So just, we've got about 6 people, between people online and in person. How many people do we have that have closed a deal? Anybody? You're gonna have to speak up because I can't see the Zoom part. Anybody? Okay. Do we have any Dodger fans? All right. So I'm guessing that are you guys muted?
Yes, I was muted.
Okay.
Has to unmute.
Yuki, do you mind if I unmute you? Or do you have background noise that you need to? All right, anyway, so to either one of those questions, have you closed a contract or are you a Dodger fan? What about you? You said
I
you
have not
haven't.
lost a contract and I am not a Dodger. I am a Dodger fan. I shall say I am a Dodger.
Okay, well, it's a big deal right now for us.
Yeah.
Because if you guys were Padre fans, I'd say the session's over.
Yeah.
But, all right, so again, appreciate you guys being here. We're going to go over the most important thing once you have a contract accepted, and I can make this available online, send it out to you guys if you want it. But it's basically a 1-page sheet that I use for buyers and sellers for their timeline. So once I have a contract submitted, accepted by the seller, we start this timeline. And it goes from the first line on there is acceptance of offer, first day of escrow, when is the earnest money deposit due. Then we get into physical inspections, the inspection contingency removal. Yeah, talk to yourself, we got plenty. And then the appraisal contingency removal, and then finally the loan contingency removal. At which point, when all of those are removed, somebody is buying a house. And that's really important to keep in mind. So all of these contingencies are designed in there basically to protect the consumer or the buyer. The state of California leans towards the buyer, trying to protect them, and that's reflected in these contingencies. So we'll be going through these in more detail and what they each represent. One of the other topics we're going to talk about is risk avoidance. And that goes towards how you set expectations with your buyers and sellers and getting to know them and what their demands are and what their minimum requirements are. And the professional co-op agent relationship, which is not a very easy thing. A lot of times you'll have a transaction where you get along well with the other agent, and then you get to request for repairs and suddenly somebody's screaming in your face. And we need to maintain a professional conduct. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we provide to both sellers and buyers is being that buffer in the negotiation. You know, we want to help our buyer or our seller have their fiduciary interest in mind first and foremost, but we also want to keep the level of interaction in a professional manner, you know. Then we'll talk a little bit about referrals and reviews, post-close follow-up, how to maintain those relationships with both clients and other agents, and then we'll get into the daily success stuff. So does anybody have like a success from the last week or 2 weeks that they'd like to share? All right, you're going to get tired of the sound of my voice soon. I have one. I just am signing up a new client who was a referral, basically, from my very first client. So, first guy I ever sold a house to. I'm not going to name him by name, so I can say this. He overpaid for the property by what the market would say. But he told me after he saw that house, he goes, "You're going to get me this house." I'm like, all right. And we went through it, a lot of ups and downs going through this, getting to the close process. So it was overpriced. We had to negotiate price. There was a unpermitted garage conversion. And there was an easement, so we couldn't build a garage. So all of these things popped up, but I got him the house and I've worked with him a couple times. I have not sold another property to him since then, but he keeps coming back to me. And now, what?
Someone, Alicia said she's trying to get in, but she's not. Do you have somebody trying
Do
to
you
get in?
see?
Waiting room?
Oh.
Yeah, both of.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, that's why you couldn't get anybody to talk.
Yeah.
And that concludes our presentation. Sorry about that, folks, for not letting you in immediately. But you haven't missed anything of great importance yet. So as I was saying, you know, my share for the successes for last week was getting another buyer, which is basically the daughter of my very first client, which is kind of nice. And those things happen. They take a long time, but they do happen.
Can I say something?
Sure.
There's normally, some slides that would be
Um,
going by and,
There you go.
yeah,
You want that? All right.
you
Let's see.
can remove that if you want to. Or you can just move it around if you want to.
Can I help you, Joe? Or you good? There you
I'm
go.
just going through these. Here we go. By the way, all of that said, you are not supposed to call people on the news. Do not call list.
That's right.
But we're going to be talking about timelines, referrals and reviews, best practices and risk avoidance, post-close, follow-up, recaps and ahas, and daily success system. So we touched a little bit on the timelines. Hopefully the people that checked in later kind of got that. What we're going to go through is, have you guys been using a specific contract, a generic contract, like fictional, to talk about deadlines and stuff like that? No? All right. So anybody know, let's go with the first one. What is the default time limit on a property investigation?
17 days,
There you go. Do you want to go for the next one?
yes.
How long is it?
Or what next one? What do you mean?
There's property investigation, there's
Appraisal?
appraisal.
And removal of, the
Loan
contingencies.
contingency. How long is it?
They're also like 17 or 10, right?
Yeah,
They're all
17.
Yeah,
It's kind of the default
yeah.
across the board. Now. 14 for,
But they probably won't come
Cemetery
in.
is, 21 for the loan contingency.
is it 21 for the loan? I hadn't reviewed
Yeah.
the. Because. I know that they bumped it up. It used to
Yeah,
be
it moved
14
over.
days for physical and they bumped it up to 17. But that goes back to the RPA.
But everyone wants 10 days now.
Exactly. And so all these
And now we
default
get a
things,
counter offer, 10 days.
it's a seller's market right now. Still, things are changing, but we still, as sellers, have some leverage and we can say, you got to do it faster, you got to do it quicker. And, buyers have to adapt to it. So. I apologize. I did not get your name.
Oh, my name is Romeo.
Romeo? Pleasure to have you here, Romeo. My name is Joe McMahon. Thank you. We'll go one more in here. Real estate transactions aren't particularly trouble-free. It is a strenuous and trying time that requires all the attention and effort you can command. That is very true.
Huh?
And in fact, I thought about bringing in some juggling balls to kind of demonstrate what getting to the close is like. Because you're juggling a lot of different things. You have inspectors that you have to deal with, you have loan officers, you have all kinds of different things in motion, escrow people that you may have never worked with before. You may or may not use a transaction coordinator, which I didn't do right when I started in real estate, but I do use that service now.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Oh yeah, it's the best $400 or whatever you're paying, to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. That's my opinion. It can be expensive when you're first getting in here and you need every penny, but I always recommend a second pair of eyes to look at stuff.
Which is your TC?
Yeah,
Yes.
it sends you also the date, all the other deadlines, everything like the time, 14, 17, 21, 17,
Yeah.
whatever, yeah. And what needs to be done and what needs to be released, all the
And-
contingencies and all that. So she keeps up with it and that way it helps you remind you to call the agent, the list, yeah.
And that's the important thing, I think, is what hasn't
Yes,
come
yes.
in. Because that's really important. Like one of the things that we kind of gloss over in this presentation is seller disclosures. So the seller is obligated to give a statement of disclosures regarding the condition of the property. And then your buyer is also going to get a natural hazards disclosure. And those things are really important. I mean,
Title.
and title, yes. And, I had one, couple months ago. My client was buying a property just north of LAX. And it's like, okay, we know there's a giant airport there. What else do we need? It was surprising. There were munitions, from World War II that had been
Museum.
in the ground.
Oh, yeah, oh, wow.
What
Yeah,
city is this?
Los Angeles,
By the airport.
yeah.
Okay.
So, and my client was like, okay, that's, obviously, it's not an issue, nothing has gone sideways,
Yeah,
but, somebody
Good to
else
know.
might feel differently about that. I had another client that did one, he lived in, just next to Harbor Gateway, he grew up in that neighborhood. So when the natural hazard disclosure report came up and said, there's oil wells in the area, he's like, yeah, I know that. And he accepted that risk. But disclosures are an important thing, so.
When there's a refactory, so people worried about that,
About what?
Electrical outlets, all the electrical stuff, so it's like everything else.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. As if you're working with a seller, I always tell them, you need to tell the buyer everything you know about this property to the best of your knowledge. Right? Because as a homeowner, I may not know some things about my own home. But they need to be upfront and honest in sharing those disclosures. Personally, I live on top of an old oil sump in Manhattan Beach.
Mhm.
And that will be disclosed should I ever sell my property. And as we talked, I also know that I'm within a stone's throw of a major oil refinery, the sewage treatment plant, and 2 power generating
Yeah,
stations.
exactly, powers, yeah.
Yeah.
So all of that needs to be disclosed. So we talked a little bit about deadlines. And this is really the key to getting to the close, is staying on top of your deadlines. Making sure that, and that's why I use that timeline handout for my clients, so that they know as soon as we open escrow, what the steps are that we have to go through. And that's part of setting expectations for your clients, whether it be on the buy side or the sell side. You don't want them suddenly going, oh, wait a second, that's due. Setting expectations, using the timeline, and then setting reminders for yourself a little bit ahead of those deadlines to make sure that everything has been submitted that needs to be. So, inspection. What is an inspection? Anybody? What's involved in, and now we call it a property investigation as opposed to an inspection, but what is involved in that?
My understanding is that, when an inspector goes into the property, they look at everything, they look at the foundation, they look at. If there's any easements, if there's any, maybe not easements, I'm not sure about easements, but if there's any encroachments. Or, if the property has some type of lead or some type of, mold or, any type of, material effect that may affect the price of the property.
Exactly, the word that you use there, something of material effect to the property. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And as a buyer and a buyer's agent, that's what you're looking for, anything of a material nature. Some of those things coming in under title, if there's an easement or something like that, that will most likely come up there. If there's any liens on the property.
That comes on the, doesn't that come on the prelim though, like the easements and encroachments or?
It should, but that's coming from your title.
Yeah, so that, does that also come from the inspector, any encroachments or any liens or anything
No,
like
no.
that? Okay, so I
That would
missed
be
what you were
fair.
saying.
So a physical, an inspector comes into a property and is looking at it this, and they'll come across the foundation issues. The other aspect is exactly all of the roof, the electrical, all the functional things, plumbing. Is there any water pooling underneath the house? But also you're gonna have a pest inspection. Which is termite and dry rot. And so those are the two big things. And, you know, I've had some properties that where they came in and did the physical inspection. And just to point out, just to remind everybody, even in the updated RPA, properties are sold how? As is. So we have a responsibility to go in and investigate all of this stuff. Because the seller is saying, this is the house, do you want to buy it? And they'll disclose what they know about it. But they are not committed to doing anything above and beyond that. Now, how many offers do not have a request for repairs?
We always do that.
Yeah, everybody's gonna ask for something. They're gonna try and get an edge. They're gonna try and get a discount, all of that. And I've had some that I thought would not make it through. A property that had the seller disclosed, there's foundation issues, there's termite issues, and the termite inspector came out of the house and he's just shaking his head. He goes, I thought I was gonna fall through.
The house.
That's how bad the termites were.
Oh.
And I turned to my buyer and I was like, well, that's not. But you know what? My buyer said, let's keep going. And so you never know. You don't want to prejudice your buyer or your seller. You know, wait for them to give you the feedback. Give them the information and get their feedback. So something that I personally would, if I were buying this house, I'd be like, no way. But that's not my client. He's not me. So just kind of take a breath, review the information and see how your buyer or seller wants to proceed. What was the other thing I was going to say on this? So the other aspects, we talked about the natural hazards disclosure, title, making sure that it's clean title, there's no liens on it. So then you get to the end of the inspection period or property investigation period. That's the first one.
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question. So when you're sending in for termite and dry rot, is that a separate inspection report or is that the same one with the inspection of the property?
There may be some contractors that will do both, but I've always done it separate
Why do you do it separate?
because they're licensed. Like termite guys are just licensed to do
Oh,
termite.
okay, okay.
You know, I don't know that there's people that do both, but I assume there are. I will let you in on something, an experience that I had. As representing the seller on a property, they did the termite inspection.
It's better to do it in advance if you can, always, you know, like, just ask the seller if they could have, you know, if they want it done.
Yeah.
It helps, it helps.
And you know what, that brings up a good point. I was gonna mention this. There's a couple of different programs out there. One is called Verified, and they have a strict procedure where you get an appraisal, you get a physical inspection, you get the termite and everything done before you go to market, representing the seller.
Hello. Excuse
Yes.
me. I'm sorry. I got a message from Javier. He's waiting in the room. Could you let him
Okay,
in?
thank you.
Thank you.
How about you back there? Participants. I don't.
You can scroll up, baby. Scroll up. Participants, because those are the participants.
It's not scrolling. Right. Oh. All right, Javier.
Javier, yeah, he
Yeah.
needs to be in here. He's got a couple. He's,
Oh, you could just, okay, click on the black and then hold it and then bring it down so you can do this
Yeah,
at the top.
yeah,
Yeah, just on the
So-
black, yeah.
click on the
You
button. See if we can move it so that we can see what's going. Yeah, move it.
You see how you move it? Yeah.
Okay, now click on it
And go to participants, yeah.
and. Sounds good. You want me to get,
Sure.
okay,
I apologize, Javier. We'll get you in here, but he can't hear me. So I was talking a little bit about the verify strategy for selling a home.
I do have a question about that.
Sure.
So I had a buddy who was representing the buyers.
Okay.
He helped close the property in Anaheim, right? On the open house, so they had a pool running to cover they have a crack in the pool, so they covered it with like the pool running was active. So after they closed it, they didn't have about a crack in the pool afterwards. So like I know that earlier as well, like in the eyes of the law, like is that like could he not do any about it, or it was just like.
Well, he had it, you said he was representing the buyer,
Yeah.
correct? So his buyer had the opportunity to inspect that pool.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And once he signed off on that property investigation contingency,
It's already like.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, this is California. And, you know, there are attorneys that will take your money and proceed with something, but according to the contract, that contingency has been removed.
Okay. Thank you.
I know, I'm useless.
Where is it?
Don't know.
part of the
Otherwise she
waiting
wouldn't
room.
be here.
She told me that, she said Javier was waiting.
I'll see him waiting.
Is he waiting?
All right.
Thank you, Joe, for your insight.
Sure. So that sort of thing would probably come out if you were participating in a program like Verified. And one of the things that they talk about is the fact that nationwide, requests for repairs average about $6,000.
Wait, say it again?
Request for repairs,
What costs $6,000?
which can be anything. So when you're doing your property investigation,
See that anybody's waiting.
okay, just give me back to my slide.
Oh.
Thank you, as long as you're here. So I'm representing a buyer. We're in escrow, we're doing the property investigation. My inspector comes back and says, so you got a leak under the house. Air conditioner isn't functioning. And so then I present that to the buyer and we decide what that is. What's it gonna cost to repair that? And then we would submit that to the seller saying, okay, in order to close this deal, we need to remedy these situations. So that's a request for repairs. And that can be met either with the seller actually doing the repairs prior to the close of escrow. Or providing credit. That's usually what it comes down to.
Can the seller actually do the job within a 30-day period? What if it's like a roof, or what if it's like
Yeah,
something?
so there are things that you couldn't do in that time frame,
Mhm.
but
Like what kind of stuff can you do within a 30-day period? Like what would be a
Plumbing
thing?
repairs, air conditioning repairs. If water heater isn't strapped in properly, you correct that. There's a lot of minor corrections.
You can do
be
that
done.
within a 30-day period?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
and
okay.
you can get it done sometimes within a couple of weeks.
What if it's a major problem like a roof?
Well, that would be something different.
That would
Yeah, I'm
be
gonna
negotiable.
touch on that a little
Okay,
bit in a
okay.
second. Because that can be a serious thing. Actually, the first home I ever put an offer in on, the roof was horrible.
So $25,000 to repair a roof.
Yeah. But, as I said, we'll get to that in a little bit more detail in a second. The other thing that there's another program, we have heard of 72 Soul. And they didn't invent this idea, but it's been a common thing in the past, and now they're using it as part of their presentation. So is something broken? Is something worn, or something cosmetic? So a buyer comes in to look at a house for sale. They can see everything visually about the house. They're not a contractor. They don't know about the functionality of the plumbing, the electrical, that sort of thing. But they can tell that the carpet is new. They can tell that these rooms need to be repainted. Those are cosmetic issues. And that really, if you're representing a seller, you should make it clear that we're not gonna cover that. Because, you know, you could see that, so work that into your offer. If you're representing a buyer, it's like, okay, so in this condition, as we see it, what do you think this house is worth? Because it's clearly visible and, you know, but people they will come back and say, well, I'm gonna have to tear this out, I'm gonna have to tear that out. It's like, you can see that when you view the property. And it's just because it's not to your taste or your liking, not necessarily a good basis for a request for repair. Now, one of the other two was broken. So if something's broken, if the electrical panel isn't working, so you gotta get that replaced. That's reasonable. Going to the roof. So roofs have an estimated life, maybe 20 years. So if it's 15 years old, it's worn. Is that a reasonable thing for somebody to say, you know what, maybe we should prorate this, what would it cost me to replace this? That's something to consider on both the buy and the seller side.
What is the average age of a roof, you said, 25 years?
20 to 25 years, I think. Maybe it's a little higher now with better construction. And now you can get people to spray stuff on top of your roof and give you another 5 years.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's very good, but.
Well, it adds 5 years, you know.
Yeah. So those are all different avenues to deal with inspections. All right. And then, so that's go ahead.
What are some of the major problems of a house besides the roof and the foundation and maybe electrical panels? Is there anything else that could be out there that it's not
Well,
normal?
termite,
Oh, termite, okay.
Yeah.
Termite is major?
it can be, it
Okay.
depends upon how long it's been. I mean, termites can show up like the next month,
Oh,
and it takes them, I think, like 3 to 5 years to start doing damage. So it's good to, as a seller, it's good to have your property tented and inspected for termite damage. As a buyer, you definitely have to have a termite professional come out and take a look at it. And I'm not a termite expert, so don't quote me on those numbers, but that's my general knowledge.
now what about dry rot?
That is,
What
goes
is-
along, generally
Dry rot
that's
is
part of.
like when things are cracking up, right? Or what is dry rot?
Dry rot is it's an organism. So it's moisture in an organism in the wood.
And how long does that take to cause damage?
But usually you'll find that, and you'll find that as a realtor, you should be walking around the house and kind of looking. I think it is not our responsibility. We're not professional inspectors, we're not contractors. But as a service, I think it's good to be walking around the house and looking and saying, yeah, we might want to look at that.
What does dry rot look like?
It's generally like, you'll see a termite person or pest inspection person poking holes in the eaves. So it's wood that has become soft. No. Not
That's
gonna
not a
lie,
good sign.
I got some in my house. So. In fact, homes that have their eaves covered,
Mhm,
that's a good thing, in my opinion.
mhm.
It's like, okay, it's not as great a risk. It's still a risk, but it's not as great. All right, let's go here for who's involved in this transaction. This would be a small group. But everybody else is online. So who all do you think, and feel free to chime in on the chat in terms of who is involved in this transaction?
That's a broad question.
It is.
Who was
But-
involved in this transaction?
Yeah, so I'm selling a house, you're representing the buyer. How many parties are there and how many professionals outside of those people
Like,
are
like,
involved?
like the loan officers, inspectors.
Exactly,
Financial review.
yes. That's what we're looking at. Can you think of any other people that are involved?
Escrow and title and, all the inspections, all the professional inspectors that come to
There you go.
inspections.
That pretty much covered in other parts of the country, and I had a client who moved here from New Jersey. And he asked me, it's once we opened escrow, he's like, so when did the attorneys get involved? I was like, well, if things go well, never.
Yeah.
But in other parts of the country, attorneys are involved in the transaction. That is not general practice here in California. So you've got the buyer, the seller, the agents for each of those. You have the lender. You have the escrow company. You have the title company. You have the people doing the inspections. And then you may have a transaction coordinator. Oh, an appraiser as part of the loan process.
Is that appraiser always involved?
Well, no, if it's a cash deal, you don't need an appraiser. So just had a deal a while back and it's like, we don't need to worry about it. My buyer was comfortable with the price that she was paying. It was an investment property and she was paying cash. So she wasn't worried about an appraiser, but we didn't have one. Now, I'll also touch on this a little bit here. Sometimes, I think I made reference to this particular transaction earlier, sometimes somebody really wants a house. And the appraisal comes in low. But if they have enough money, they can make it up, right? Generally, what you would do is if you're representing the buyer, you would say, okay, the bank said it's not worth this much. So you gotta come down the price. Otherwise, the buyer has to come up in money. That particular client, he had such a significant down payment that it didn't make a difference. So a low appraisal is not a death certificate for a deal.
How does a huge down payment have an effect on the appraisal?
Doesn't have an effect on the appraisal itself.
On the lender,
It has an effect on qualifying for the loan.
the higher the loan, the down payment, the deposit, is that what you're talking about, the
Yes,
deposit?
exactly.
The higher the deposit,
The
the,
higher the down payment, not necessarily the earnest money deposit,
oh, okay,
but the
okay.
higher the down payment.
Uh-huh.
He was contributing probably 30%.
Yeah.
So that entices the lender to,
Well, the lenders, you know, the amount of money that he's borrowing against this property is much less than what it's worth.
Yeah,
Oh,
so it doesn't-
10%, be like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
so if the so let's give you an example, so the property's $1 million. And the appraisal comes up to $850, and he's putting 20% down, which is like, what, $20,000? 20% down, $20,000,
20% on $1 million
On
property.
the-
is like
$200,000.
Yeah,
Okay, so he puts down $200,000, it comes, it's at $850. He doesn't, does that still qualify? It's not about the quantity, it's not about how much money. Is it, I'm trying to see if it's a percentage or if
it
it's
varies
actual.
by lender to
Yeah.
lender,
Mhm.
but they will most likely qualify at that. I mean,
Because
we all
he's
know that
the
buyers
money.
are buying properties with 5% and 10%, right?
Mhm.
So if you've got 20 or 30% down payment on a property, you know, the lender is protected.
But that still doesn't cover the $850 of the price of the appraisal. That only covers the 800,000 so they'll allow those 50,000. So the appraisal comes down to $850. The property is worth $1 million. He puts down 20% of that, which is 200,000. So there's a $50,000 discrepancy. The lender will allow that to. The lender will say, okay, well, the property is only $850, you're putting down 20%. But the price of the property is $1 million. You know what I mean? It's like those $50,000 that it came down low, you're putting down the payment, it's not covering the price of the loan. It's not covering the amount of the loan. And the appraisal is not hitting the appraisal is not hitting. You know what I mean?
I think I do, but I think what you're missing is that the appraiser has said that the property is worth X amount of dollars.
$850, in my
Yeah.
example, $850.
Yes,
And
And
I'm
the
putting
bank is
20% down, which is 200, so there's $50,000 that's missing there, right? There's $50,000 that's missing. Because I'm putting 20% down, which is 200, the appraisal is at $850, but the amount of the property is $1 million.
yes.
So-
The 20% was about $1 million, not $850.
I'll say it
The
again.
20% of the down payment is 20,000, that's the 20% of $1 million.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but
So-
the appraisal is at $850. The appraisal is at $850, so I'm putting, you know what I mean? It's like,
Well, I would encourage you, I'm not a lender,
okay,
but I know my personal experience.
Mhm.
Where people have had appraisals come in low and were able to work it so that the lender would cover
okay,
that.
okay,
loan.
so it's not gonna be
It's not a death
It's not
certificate.
a death sentence, it's not
Yeah,
a death sentence.
Exactly, and that's why having a relationship with your buyer's lender is really important.
Okay,
And
okay.
as I go into my next track, it's actually right now, I'm gonna be talking about that very thing. Go ahead.
As far as lenders, I know it's off topic, but do private lenders or people who own like companies, do they spread off the loans on a different percentage? Compared to like the market, which is like 5%, they go lower than that? Like, you know, people usually pay an interest rate of 5%, like right now, 5-6%. Can you go lower if you're a private lender or if they don't own company? Or like have their own-
Yeah, they might be able to.
Okay,
I haven't worked with a lot of private lenders. I've worked with mortgage brokers, I've worked with banks.
What was this question? I didn't hear.
Oh,
It's a private loan.
yeah, I met a guy in Beverly who said he could write off like loans, lower than 5%, so I was like, I'm confused how that works, because I know the market like 5 to 6% right now.
I've heard
And
of that
there's
too.
other programs. One that Fred Howard works with a lot is called NACA. And they do very low down, they can get grants. There's a lot of different programs out there so that, but they are sometimes limited geographically
Okay.
within certain demographics. So
Yeah, they're very specialized loans.
They are.
Okay.
So-
I was just wondering about.
that could be
It's not the
a
general.
6-hour
Yeah.
presentation.
Thank you.
So I think we covered, who all might be involved in a real estate transaction. Oh, one that we didn't mention is kind of important. So I'm representing the seller, let's say.
Mhm.
Who else is involved? My broker.
Mhm.
So just something to keep in mind is we are independent contractors, but our broker's name is on there. So going through the timeline, what is the first thing my buyer needs? What do they need to know and do? So what's the first thing they need to do? They got their offer accepted.
They need to put the deposit down.
There you go, earnest money deposit. Generally 3%. It could be more, it could be less. So I showed you my timeline. Once you have an offer accepted, this reference to what does the rest of the team need to know? It's like a flurry of emails. And it's like, I send out a list of all the people involved. I copy my buyer or seller, copy the other agent, copy their transaction coordinator, copy the lender, so that everybody has the information they need if they have any questions coming up.
Is it okay to have this transparency?
Yeah,
All the transactions, all the
Transparency
professionals,
is a good
everything,
thing.
transparency is a good thing at that
Yeah,
point.
at
yeah.
this point, I mean, transparency.
And who
is-
do you send that to?
Well, I would, like I said, I would copy, my buyer or seller. I would copy the other agent, copy any transaction coordinators that are involved. Loan people, escrow,
Everyone is involved.
yeah. Everybody you need to have working to get this thing closed.
Escrow, TC, loan, buyer and seller.
So this last one here, what am I doing at each point to bulletproof the transaction and set myself and my buyers up for a successful close? I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but what do you think is the most important?
What is the question?
What am I doing at each point to bulletproof the transaction and set myself and my buyers up for a successful close?
Effectively communicate.
There you go, effectively communicate. What slight variation on that would be setting expectations. You know, we gave them all the deadlines, they know what's coming up, and they need to know what to expect at each of those stages. All right, where are we at here? So, we've talked about, we didn't go into too much detail on the request for repairs, but we kind of touched on it. So I want to go back to it a little bit. I've done my property investigation. I found things that need to be correct. So we talked a little bit about, you can ask for credit, you can ask for the repairs to be performed. And you can wait, if they agree to perform those repairs, you can wait to remove your property investigation contingency.
You can't ask to reduce the price of the house.
You can ask for anything.
Okay, negotiation.
Is it reasonable? You know, that's
Yeah,
the sort of thing. And you know, that's sometimes we're put in a position where we can give our advice to a client and say, you know, I don't think that's reasonable. And they're like, that's what I want. And it's like, okay, then that's what we're gonna ask. Go ahead.
so say you're representing the buyer and you do an inspections and the roof comes up to $25,000 damage, you know, because it needs to be fully repaired. Is it reasonable in the negotiation to ask for the full repair of the roof? Is that something reasonable? Or how do you negotiate that?
Yeah, it's gonna be one of the things that I would say, I've walked through the property. I haven't seen any water damage. If I had seen water damage, maybe.
Mhm.
Because usually roofs, there's gonna be, you can make minor repairs to it. It may be at the end, towards the end of its useful life,
Mhm.
but you can always ask.
So I imagine that could be used as a negotiation tactic to beat out the price.
Yeah, you can negotiate a price reduction, credits for closing costs, or have the repairs actually done. And I've had experiences where we negotiated so much electrical and tile work and stuff like that in the repairs that my buyer had no closing costs and was able to buy his rate down with the money.
Oh, the closing.
Yeah. So that is a point where you can really show your value in terms of how you're helping your client on either side by being adamant, saying no. But if you're representing the seller, or being very aggressive on the other side, representing your buyer and say, come on, we got to get this done. And that brings up a point. Have any of you guys heard of this book, Never Split the Difference?
I've heard of, I've never read it, but I've
I
heard
actually
it.
finished reading that like last week.
It's a really good read, isn't
Really
it?
good read.
I listened to it on audio, but it's called Never Split the Difference. And for you guys on Zoom, I highly encourage you to take a listen or to read it.
What is the gist of it?
It is what was he, an FBI
Yeah,
negotiator?
basically, you just like, it never takes the first, like whatever he's given at the beginning, never takes it for like what it is. He always keeps pushing the issue, give negotiation until he gets like, the proper like, stuff that he actually wants, like he's content with, you know, he doesn't like, he's
Yeah,
not content with the first offer.
And what does the staff do? What does he
When
do?
he's the FBI, well, he has like it's a long history of.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so.
but it basically goes into, because it's very common, and when I first got into real estate, you know, in business previously, it's like, we're this far apart. Okay, let's agree in the middle. Like, well, why agree in the middle initially? Let's start a little bit higher. And it's like just being a little more aggressive in your negotiation and understanding that you might be able to do better.
Yeah.
So be aggressive. You need to be aggressive. You need.
Yeah, you need to, I would say you need to be reasonable, but aggressive. And going back to what we talked about earlier, professional in your demeanor.
Like keeping the control in a professional way.
Yeah. And recognizing, and in negotiation and in this transaction, there is a point at every point in this transaction where either the seller is very tied in once they accept an offer.
Mhm.
It's really hard for them to get out of a deal. But for a buyer, they can take a walk pretty much up until their last contingencies,
And you still get-
especially before the inspection period. I mean, that's like free range, because it's like, you can say, you know, I've taken a second look at this property, I've investigated, I don't want it. And that's something that everybody needs to be prepared to do. We don't want to do it. We want to have our buyers buy a home that they will enjoy for many years to come. And coincidentally, I will get paid on it. But my first obligation, my fiduciary responsibility is to my buyer or to myself.
Mhm.
That's funny you mentioned that book. I literally just finished reading it.
Yeah,
It's really
Oh,
good,
that's
really
good.
good chance, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, how many pages is it?
I have it on my Kindle. I think
Oh,
like-
it's on the Kindle.
Yeah, I think, probably like,
200.
what are you looking for? You guys should-
Oh,
I can check for you.
Oh, it's insane.
all right, so this is, I think we've talked about this a little bit. They recommend giving a list of title companies, inspectors, and insurance agents. I have vendors that I use. I don't generally provide a list. I tell my buyer or seller, this is who I use. If you want to use them, you can. If you want to find somebody else, you are free to do that.
Mhm.
So. Oh. Reminding buyers not to make big purchases. That's a really big thing. So I'm a buyer, I've been pre-qualified to get a certain loan based on my current debt. And then I go buy really nice truck.
He's happy, he's gonna buy a house, he wants a car to go with it.
Yeah, well, that suddenly changes the debt to equity ratio and, you know, that can be a problem. So that is a conversation that you should have with buyers.
Actually, I had a uncle that did that. He spent like 50,000 on new appliances before closing the house. Did, you know, he bought it. He's still in escrow.
Because he was buying this new
Yeah.
house and he's like, I need these new appliances,
Oh.
but he should have waited until it was closed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's, you know, don't go crazy at the car dealership or IKEA or
Mhm.
Amazon.
Lowe's, Amazon. Let's see, what am I touching base? Oh, so touching base with the lender, title company, or listing agent. You know, a lot of these, you want to do right up front. I talked about that flurry of emails and copying everybody and getting them on board. But a phone call is good too, you know, just to touch base and say, hey, you know, how you feeling about this? And in fact, with the lender, if you're representing the buyer, you probably should have had this conversation already.
What kind of conversation, what kind of conversation? I had a buyer that I was really, my buyer had a very good had years of experience buying from the same lender because he had bought 3 properties with them. And I didn't know if I needed to communicate with him because the buyer had such a good relationship with the lender.
Yeah, you should talk to them.
Mhm.
Just to
Well, talk to
introduce,
him about what?
well, you just say, hey, I'm working with Sam on this next purchase. I see that you've worked with him in the past, you've got his pre-approval, just want to make sure everything is good. How quickly can you guys work? Because sometimes to be a competitive offer, you have to shorten escrow. And some lenders are comfortable with that, some aren't.
So, that's in escrow, what do you have to do?
So sometimes to be a competitive offer,
Uh-huh.
a seller wants a shorter escrow.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
as the buyer's representative, you may have to negotiate that.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
you need to know whether or not your lender can meet those terms.
Okay,
It's like,
okay.
how quickly can you close this loan?
Mhm.
Can you do
Or
it?
they
in-
can come down in escrow, in lender fees, because sometimes their closing fees are like 3%, and, you know. If it's
Yeah.
3% and, if it's 3%, I had a problem with this guy because he had a 3% escrow and he was trying to do something. I forget what was the fee, it was like, they had such a huge fee that it had an effect on the loan.
Loan? Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, that's something I generally have never done that,
Mhm, mhm.
negotiated with escrow.
Oh, you'll find the
on
2-1 buy downs, remember because the interest rate was high, and you can do the
Yeah.
2-by-1 downs,
Yeah,
and there's a certain amount that they can do. It was something like that, yeah.
yeah, but I would generally leave that to the borrower
Mhm.
to negotiate.
Oh, okay, that
With
would,
the
yeah,
lender.
that's what I said, that's, your
I mean,
your
you
lender's
can-
charging you too
We
much.
could be a part of that conversation, but that's really
Yeah, that's really
their
their.
represent, yeah. And that's where knowing a number of different lenders is very important,
Mhm.
so you can send them someplace else, you may see something. And along those same lines, I'll go back to the property investigation. Property I was selling, they did the property investigation on the termite. Go ahead.
I also have one more question. As far as like inspection goes, is there any more, is it very more when, it's a commercial property?
Yeah, I do not have commercial experience. I've done some multi-unit, like triplexes. So that's, it seemed pretty similar to me in terms of, single family,
Oh,
in terms of inspection and stuff.
Mhm.
Now, one difference there will be when you go to look at a multi-unit property, if there's tenants, it's gonna be, a lot of times they'll say, you gotta write an offer. If we like it, then you can look at the property,
Mhm.
which is fine for an experienced investor. For somebody buying their first multi-unit, that can be a little bit challenging.
Did what? What happened? What did he not do with the property? The multi-unit? I didn't get that whole thing, what you just said right now.
Okay, so if I'm selling a multi-unit property.
Mhm.
It's fairly common to say, you have to submit an offer and then I'll show you the property. So pretty much silencing. You make the offer, if they like it, then you can do your inspection and then you can decide whether or not you're gonna buy it. Because I have tenants in there and I can't displace my tenants for every offer or every potential buyer.
Oh,
and if the tenants are in contract, it goes past like the date you sold, isn't like the new owner is like responsible for having, like keeping those tenants until like the date expires? Or do they have to get?
That's a subtlety that I haven't had to deal with. But generally, you should have that negotiated ahead of time. It's like, okay, are the tenants going to stay with the property? Do I want that? Or do I want them out? Do I want the property delivered vacant? And that has to be negotiated. I've had to deal with that, on an investment property during COVID.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. People were like,
mhm.
they're like, so the tenant said they're gonna leave? I go, yeah, they put it in writing, they're going to leave. And we all kind of looked at each other and said, well, I hope they do.
This means smaller rights, yeah.
Yeah, and there are, it's a lot of times there's a buyout to pay for relocation for a tenant,
Mhm.
which can be expensive, but that is
Or you
one
can
of
do
the,
cash for keys too.
yeah, it's very simple.
Entice them with a little bit of cash to move out.
Yeah,
Big league.
Yeah, you're like, here's a $5,000 check, go find yourself.
all right. Okay, I recommend this first question, is this an act of communication or a document? Have a conversation, send an email. Then, hey, it was great talking to you, this is what we said. You want as much support as possible
Mhm.
on these types of things. It's very good to know what are the best methods for communication. Again, that's something that you probably have gone over with your buyer or seller previously as to what they prefer. My current buyer, they want to text.
Mhm.
So I text them, I send them an email, then I call. But I text them first.
Question,
Sure.
is for texting, say you want a buyer that only accepts calls, I have some people, some of my past clients that all they wanna do is call, because that's all they've done their whole, especially the older people, they don't want
Yeah.
text, they don't wanna call, they just wanna be on the phone. And if you need to be documenting stuff like this to have it for your own records to cover yourself in case there's a lawsuit or something, how do you go about that?
Again, the way I would do it is you're gonna have to have an email address to get their signatures. So after you have a conversation on the phone, send them an email summarizing what your conversation.
Okay.
I have noticed, my girlfriend works with. She calls and it's recorded. They have automated voice that tells them that you're being recorded.
Huh?
Like they technically can't sue them for that.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
It's saying you're being recorded as an automated voice that goes in the middle of the conversation.
Interesting.
And they're legally protected because they
It's
say,
legally protected.
Well, based on what the conversation is.
yeah, basically.
Okay, yeah.
Let's go, templates. Create templates, for your transaction. You know,
What would be a good what would be an example of,
There's
what would you
timeline.
want to do templates?
this timeline thing that I showed you.
What
It's a-
else?
Inspection, notices, for other deadlines as they come up. That's. So on the inspection response, so you're doing your property investigation and you've submitted your request for repairs. And I've heard nothing from someone. Nothing. So what do I do? What can I do? The communication is broken down. Does happen. And you need a response from either a buyer or seller, somebody in this transaction. What's your recourse?
Go to their office.
That is one. You
people
could,
do
you
that.
could go knock on their door. I actually had an IRS agent, or my real estate agent. Found out that, the IRS had a lien on the house I was buying. And she goes, well, I'm gonna go talk to the IRS. I'm like, you do what? You can do that? You can just walk into their, and she did. She went and talked to them, said there's no equity, so they wrote it off. But yeah, so the direct approach is possible, but there's an option of what is called a notice to perform.
Oh, notice. Oh,
Yeah.
I heard of it.
So I've received different reactions to using that. Some people are like, whoa, what are you doing? Telling me I gotta perform. And it gives them 2 days.
What happens if they don't perform in those 2 days? And what do you do? I mean, they're not responding.
Yeah, well, it's like many things in life, you know, we use these tools. And
Which
then
are
they
not-
still don't play by the rules and you have to pursue it further. Whether
Okay.
it's legal or something like that, you walk away from the transaction and say, we're not going to do this, you haven't fulfilled your side of the bargain. Whatever the performance may be.
So say they want to walk away from the transaction because the buyer got cold feet and you're not hearing from the seller. Do you just walk away or do you send an email saying?
Oh, you have to send a cancellation.
Oh, a cancellation notice.
Everything, once you're in escrow, if you are going to walk away, you have to provide written, documented car forms
Mhm.
to cancel.
But
the
everything's hard form, everything is like that.
Yes, they have a form for everything.
Okay.
All right, so we're, okay, touch on this, let's keep going. Communication of deadlines. Inspectors of virus agents. All right. Oh, sorry. Am I going too
Oh,
fast?
yeah, one back, sorry, one back, can you go back? Is that possible? Okay.
And if you need these slides, I can get them for you.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
If you'd like to. So this is all about communication. Making sure.
Can we have the
Command.
seller timeline one more time, please? The
Sure.
seller
So you guys use Command?
I signed up.
Okay. You have a database on there or anything yet?
Yeah, I just, actually, yeah, I just started, signed up like last month,
Okay,
but I just got an email that I got one potential lead.
oh,
And I'm gonna use it, I just haven't gotten around it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's me
It's
too.
good to use.
I am gonna use it.
I've actually done the training and everything, and I haven't made the switch. I tried to do it on my own, just learn it, and it didn't click for me, so I took a class. So I'm running things kind of side by side, right? But it is a very powerful system, and
Yeah.
it's free.
And we already paid for it anyway.
Yeah. So, any ahas so far?
I have an I learned a lot about the inspection, however, I didn't learn so much about the appraisal. And what was the other appraisal? The appraisal and
Loan contingent.
the loan contingency. How do we go through that? I have a pretty good niche about the other stuff, but now.
Yeah, so the loan appraisal, generally, they will send an appraiser out to the property to look at it physically. They will do a market analysis of comparable properties. And if at all possible, you should be there when they do that.
Why?
Well, you should provide your own market analysis. To make sure that the appraiser, because they may not know the area. They may be going from Bellflower to Santa Monica. You're in North Torrance, and they're like, oh yeah, I know that. And, you know, it's not as common now, but, a few years back during COVID, they would just do drive-bys. You know, that's like, it's really cool if it comes in at the right price, but. So yeah, you should be there, have some interaction with them. They're going to be very staid and reserved, most likely, because they are not to be influenced. But we are providing information, applicable market information.
How do you
to them.
negotiate that if the appraisal comes lower than the price of the, that's the only concern, right? If it goes higher, then that's great, right?
Yeah,
Because your property is worth more than what you're paying. Do
yeah,
you have to show that appraisal to the seller? If
No.
it goes higher?
I don't believe so.
You don't have to show your appraisal.
If it comes in lower, you're gonna
You
show,
want to.
you're gonna say, hey, you're gonna go back and ask for a price reduction.
You ask for a price reduction.
Yeah, if it comes in low.
If it comes in high, you don't say it. It's close.
No. Check with Simon on that. Okay, guys, check with Simon on that.
That's pretty, that's just.
But, so yeah, that's the appraisal. I've had experiences where I had the appraiser call me and say, this better be the nicest house in North Torrance at this price. And I'm like, I think it is. And sure enough, it was one of the first homes to break, so this several years ago, probably 6 years ago. First homes to break $1 million on our Torrance. And it's like, yeah, you're right. It is a nice house. And it was kind of funky. It had some of the things that come into play, and you can have a conversation with an appraiser about this. So traditionally speaking, an appraisal covers the single family residence, let's say. But you have something attached to the garage. That traditionally could not be included. With the changes in ADUs and everything, they can now include that. So you need to see, make sure that if there's any unique aspect to the property,
What if the property has unpermitted stuff?
that will not be included in the appraisal value.
Okay,
So
so would
If
the
you've got a-
appraiser know?
if you've
that
got a
it's unpermitted?
15,000 square foot house physically,
Uh-huh.
and you added 300 feet unpermitted, that will not come into the appraisal. There may be some value added that they can do, but they're gonna appraise it on the permitted portion.
Would you have to report the unpermitted, structure? Like, how to say?
No. Again, talk to Simon. But a lot of homes are sold with unpermitted additions and whatnot. So.
It's not a major problem, it's not gonna be added to the value of the house.
Yeah, exactly. So your buyer needs to be aware, and the inspector needs to take a look at it and see what level of construction materials were used, what level of electrical. Would it have met permit if they had tried? Maybe.
Mhm.
Is it shoddy work? Is it undercoat?
Question about that. People make like back homes, like out of a garage.
Yeah,
Can you use that as like, how they have the home that the bedroom listed? On MLS, could you have like 2 bedrooms in the garage? Would that be like additional?
and yeah, so that, going back, that is traditionally, that would not be included. Now with ADUs being so popular, it could be. But again, if it's unpermitted, it's going to go, a lot of times you're gonna have an investor come in and say, okay, I can get so much rent for the house, I can get so much rent for the ADU or the converted garage. Does that make financial sense? It's gonna be a lot tighter on it if you've got, somebody buying their first single family home and getting a loan for 80 or 90% of the value. How that's going to work out, is gonna be a challenge. And, like I said, I've had people buy, properties that had garage conversions. And I had a hypothetical conversation with the city of Redondo Beach. And I went to them and I said, so hypothetically speaking, if I have an unpermitted garage conversion, are you gonna come after me? And they're like, well, if it comes to our attention, yes, we will. And we'll come out there and we'll tell you that you have to convert it back to a garage, because you have to have a garage in that area. And it's like, unless you have an issue with a neighbor or something, the chances are
Oh,
small.
yeah, they'll throw you.
But it's a real risk.
Yeah.
It is a valid risk that your buyer needs to know about. So, and you don't want to get in the middle of that and give them a false sense of confidence. You need to make perfectly clear that, okay, this part of the house, that's great, this part is not permitted. So are you willing to assume the risk that they may come back and say that it has to be converted? Is that a common thing that happens? Not in my experience, but it could.
Yeah, I do know everybody that is doing that right now, so I was wondering if he wants to sell it in the future. But I told him, like, it has to be like within the city rights, like laws, for it to be approved. Because it is like it comes really double.
Yeah, especially if like you go over, cities like Torrance and others have this, limit on how many square feet you can have house to lot ratio. You go over that, that's gonna be a big issue. And so to your point, you wanna make sure you're within the norms on a property.
Yeah, it's in North High as well.
Yeah, so that's one of the areas where and they've got some huge lots there.
Yeah.
And that's the major value of buying in that area. So,
Thank you.
sure. Any other ahas or things you felt we omitted?
The loan, the
What?
loan, the loan,
The loan?
the loan contingency.
What about the loan?
Any loan contingencies, how do we?
So the loan contingency is essentially saying that the lender has approved the loan. And this is a nail biting portion of it. And this is where you're gonna have conversations with your loan officer. And you're gonna say, why is it taking so long? And, you know, it's,
Can
but,
you negotiate the loan? Nothing to do, the loan is separate from the buyer,
Yeah.
you can't do much with that, you just.
no, you're not let's just say I've never renegotiated a loan on behalf of my clients.
Mhm.
There may be agents out there that do that, but you can put pressure on them. You can say, hey, we got a deadline, and this is a typical point for, we talked about a notice to perform. So if I'm a seller and we're a week past the loan contingency, it's like, hey, you gotta get this taken care of. And, you know, get on the phone with them, talk to them, ask them what's holding it up. Did you find something new? Is there something different that we didn't know about? Get some communication going.
Mhm, mhm.
I do like how you give a whole like visual of the timeline, because like some people just communicate what's gonna happen next, or like the coding, like the just transactions and inspections.
Yeah,
Like I'm also a visual learner, so seeing that kind of like broke it down like this.
good,
Yeah.
good,
I'm definitely gonna use that in my arsenal. And
yeah. Because it is a process, and that point at the end, that's the finish line. Actually, it's not even, we've already gone past that. Okay, best practices and risk avoidance. Let's see what they say about that. What do you think some best practices would be?
exposure, but not too much of your personal opinion on certain, like a lot of things, because sometimes we get like backtracked like to you. And it might, you know, bite you in the ass.
Yeah,
Legally. It didn't go, it was up to par with their client. That's not how to say that.
I think that would go along the lines of, if you're unsure of whether or not you're obligated to share something, double check and make sure whether or not you have to. If you're feeling like you should, then, you know, just make sure that you're keeping your fiduciary responsibility to your buyer or seller first. And making sure that you don't share something that you don't need to. You know, if a client asks for your professional opinion, you can give it. You know? We talked a little bit about methods of communication, whether it's text, email, phone. So a good thing for risk avoidance is making sure that you have documentation on your conversations. What else? What's some other areas where you would avoid risk? Who's your greatest risk avoidance resource?
Probably Simon.
There you go. That's the guy. And you know what? He is the ultimate authority, so to speak, in this office
Mhm.
as the broker. And you should use his expertise as much as he and you can work together. But there's also a lot of other professionals that have a lot of experience, and some people may have had a professional experience exactly like what you're going through. So you can talk to them
Mhm.
and get some insights. And then go to somebody.
Kind of like a sponsor too, you don't talk to your sponsor about that.
You mean like a mentor?
Yeah, or buy you win.
Yeah, oh yeah, so if you have a professional relationship with a mentor, then they should be taking you by the hand. Fred might not like me saying this.
Well, he
But-
there was a meeting and, it was either Fred or Simon that said it was a chain of command. It's a chain of command. So the first person, if you have a mentor, you ask your mentor, then the mentor's gonna ask there's one person above him, one person above the mentor, I forget what her name is. It's a lady. It's the coordinator or somebody like that. And then you go to Fred, and then if Fred doesn't know, then you go up. There's like the chain of command of 3 people before you actually go to the top.
Okay. I'll have to get
Yeah, there was a
copy of
meeting,
that.
there was a meeting of that, last Friday about it, for newcomers, for people that are coming in.
Because of so many new people coming to the
Um,
office.
Fred got promoted to ALC, and, there's gonna be a few mentors, gonna be 4 mentors now, and then there's one lady that is above these 4 mentors, and then it's Fred.
Okay.
It's like a chain of command.
I
Alright.
see. There's a lot of people, and that's why, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of people coming up, yeah.
All right. Do you guys need to take a break? I know I've gone like 90 minutes at this point.
I don't need a break.
I'm fine. Drums.
If you need a break. do you need a
No.
break?
I'll
We have
listen
half
to
an
it.
hour.
Yeah. We may not need. So these are pretty clear, communicate clearly, every step of the transaction, expectations. Be very clear on that, making sure your clients know what to expect and when, and maintain your professionalism throughout. That is something, I think I touched on it earlier, you know, things can get heated, in negotiations. I went on the listing appointment and a meeting with the wife of this couple, and we're talking about listing their property for sale. And while I'm sitting there, I know that her husband is on title as well, so at some point I want to talk to him, but let's get this listing. He showed up at the window. And he was not very happy. And it was the beginning of a divorce.
Oh.
And
By the middle.
yeah, it's but I had to take a beat and just say, okay, well. You know, and it was challenging to go through that with the 2 sides and stuff. Oh, yeah, it was terribly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's one of those situations where you have to just take a beat, take a breath. What am I supposed to do here? So maintaining your professionalism throughout.
In that situation, do you stay in a room with them, or do you feel like?
Well, he never came into the room. So I stayed in the room with her. We finished the presentation. He stormed off. And by the end of the transaction, he and I were buddies.
Oh, really? Oh.
But all throughout that, I was just answering the questions and providing the information that was not making any personal assessments or comments about how things were going with them.
Did you tell him about the transaction or?
Oh, yeah, he was involved. He was
Oh, he
involved
was involved.
all the way through. He just didn't know it was coming that quickly.
Oh, okay, okay.
And you know, when you have people in different situations like that, you're trying to get in touch with somebody, they're not responding, and you have to talk to somebody else, and you can't provide any commentary about how anybody is working, just like they haven't. Right?
So question for
Sure.
you. So in that case, if they're getting divorced and they're not getting anywhere near each other, but they're both on title, how do you manage that communication when they're separate? Like, how do you maneuver?
Twice as many phone calls.
Okay, you just. have to be
You
doing
copy
all of
people on emails,
that.
and that's how you do it.
Okay.
And if you need to meet in person, you meet twice.
Is it, between like the first couples, is it that you have to have both of them at the same time, like with you? Like during that transaction, do you have to have like both of them like present?
No, not necessarily. As long as you're getting their signatures.
Okay.
They don't have to be in the same room. You know? And one other thing about maintaining your professionalism, which actually goes even before this session, when you are showing properties. And I had this come up recently, I was sitting in an open house. It was no attendance whatsoever, nobody showed up. And we started having a conversation, me and the other agent. I had to check myself. It's like, okay. I turned to her and I said, you know what, we can talk about this thing. Because I remembered that there was a camera up in the corner.
Oh, I remember having that conversation with you.
Yeah, and so that's something that we need to be aware of. When we're showing properties, when we're looking at properties, we need to know that pretty much everywhere there's gonna be a camera. And if you wanna have a private conversation with your buyer or seller, you should probably do it outside,
Mhm.
you know?
There's even cameras outside too.
Yeah.
Probably wait for the conversation.
Yeah, I had somebody say, they came back to do a second walkthrough on the property investigation. And the seller was like, what are you taking all these kids through my house for? Because the family that was buying the property brought their kids with. I'm like, well, they're looking at the property, the kids are in the backyard. She was bent.
You have those people.
Yep, and we love to work with them if they're well-funded and pre-approved. Let's go.
Okay.
Where is the deal at risk of falling apart? So I guess the earliest point would be the earnest money. You know, if suddenly they've spent what they had in the bank, they don't have the cash for the 3%, that would be the first place, right? But we've had conversations with them, we've seen the bank statements. We know, and now we have forms for financial disclosure, which we didn't have previously. So we've got a much better financial profile of both our buyers. So. And then each of the contingencies. You know, that doesn't pass any one of those three. And I guess, well, we'll just stick to getting to the close. We're assuming that we have the property in escrow. Best practices to keep the deal alive.
Communicate.
Communication, yes. And, you know, telling people, like, if we can't reach an agreement on this, then it's not gonna happen. You know, but really expressing how close you are to walking away if you're the buyer. Tough one, it's a very tough one. Be the fiduciary. Always act in your client's best interest, even when it seems to conflict with your own. That's,
I guess it goes back to my personal story with my buddy. I work representing the buyer, and their seller and seller agent didn't disclose about the pool. They cracked into it.
yeah,
So they didn't disclose it because they didn't want to fall deal.
yeah, I mean, if the agent knew anything about that, I gotta believe in that situation, if it was a significant enough leak. And the owner has to keep refilling their pool, they had a hunch, you know? But maybe they like, I don't know for sure, so I'm not gonna have anybody come out and check it, cause then I will know for sure. But yeah, to act in our client's best interest. And as tough as it may be, you may have worked with a client showing them a half a dozen or a dozen homes. You finally find one, you get an offer accepted. You hit a bump in the road in escrow and you have to walk away. And you're just like, that's really painful. That's a lot of time that I've invested. But it's in the best interest of your client.
Mhm.
So. Is that it? Are we done? Oh, referrals and reviews. I'm terrible at this. I'll tell you right now. But it's something, part of my real estate game that I have to improve on. It's getting people to write me reviews. I do get referrals from people. And I get great interpersonal referrals. I've had clients refer me to their relatives and that sort of thing. But I need to do better online in terms of whether it's Google, my own website, Zillow, homes.com, whatever it's gonna be. Don't be like Joe. Get out there, ask for the referral or the review. Because clients are gonna like it. You just got them the home that they wanted. They're excited. So go ahead and leverage that.
Mhm.
Get them to tell people.
When they're too busy to write a review, do they like, be calling the phone and type a form, I have them sign it over like sign?
You could send them an email saying, hey, it would be great if you could make some comments and give them suggestions on the types of things that you say. But they're gonna have to go online and put those in. So. And you know, part of the referrals and reviews, and we're not doing this to get them, but a lot of people do closing gifts. And I got a review online from somebody because when the first time I met them, we were looking at properties in South Torrance. And it's like the Christmas area.
Yeah.
And the house came with all the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
And so they looked at it, they really liked it, and as we're walking back to the car, she goes, we don't really want the lights, we're Jewish. It's like, okay, well, you don't have to take them. But so she shared that with me, and then I learned how big a part their faith was in their life. And so I forget what they're called, but they're little tiny scrolls that Jewish people put on their doorframe as a blessing to their house. I got them one as a closing, and she really appreciated it. So, you know, that's having a good working relationship and a positive relationship with your clients, whether they're buying or selling, is what's going to get you those referrals and reviews. But we do need to ask for them as well. Ask for reviews at every conversation, at the close of the transaction. Earn your unfair share, same thing. All right. Let's just power through here. Post close follow-up, I kind of touched on that. You can make a point, set a reminder to talk to them a couple weeks, month after closing. How's it going? Has anything come up? You know, how do you feel it went? But if you're in good communication with your clients, you're gonna hear all of that stuff. If there was anything left hanging, so to speak, that needed to be done, performed, any minor issues that haven't been corrected, follow up regarding that. Let's see. It kind of, actually, I'll jump in here. Go off script. So one of the things that is part of getting to the close is the final walkthrough. And if you have relieved or removed all of your contingencies, this is a formality. And it should be because it's just like 5 days before the close.
So you do that after you remove all contingencies?
Generally, most contingencies have to be removed prior to this. It's not that they're connected to being removed or not removed. It's just the way the timeline works. Those deadlines come up well before the 5 days prior to the close of escrow. And hopefully it's just a formality. Like you guys have checked in on any repairs that needed to be made. And what you're verifying is that the property is in essentially the same condition it was when you made the offer. And you've already confirmed any repairs that were required.
How do you confirm the repairs?
You go out to the property.
You go,
Say
you can.
you get a
can go-
receipt, you get a receipt from a plumber,
Mhm.
you go out to the property and make sure that that work was done.
Okay, so the buyer is going to the property back and forth, making sure these things are getting taken care of.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean, generally, you wouldn't want to make multiple trips. You would say if there's multiple things to be done. Like, okay, they told me A is done, B is done, now C is done. I'm gonna go out and verify all of them.
Okay,
And you're gonna have receipts for all of those.
who gives you the receipts?
The
The seller?
contractor, whoever did the work,
But what if the seller
Or the
has
lender.
done all the work? The seller.
if they did it themselves,
No, like the seller is the one that hired these contractors to do the work. Who gives the buyer the receipt?
you should, as their agent, you should ask for receipts.
Okay,
and
ask
proof
for
of completion.
receipts. So the buyer is, the buyer's agent is the one that gets the receipts
Yeah.
from the seller.
You're the one that's like,
Oh,
really, you did that? Show
yeah.
me. I don't believe you. No.
No, because it's business. It's
Yeah.
business.
No, you need documentation to say that
Uh-huh.
these repairs were made.
Mhm.
Um,
And what happens if something's wrong and you already removed all the contingencies? And
yeah, that's,
somebody smashed something, the house gets broken, anything can happen.
they can't,
So what do you do after you removed all the contingencies and that's
you're
done?
pretty much on the hook. I mean,
Something's wrong.
if something significant has changed that was not there before, you can go back and say, okay, we need to do something.
We revise the whole contract, man.
But what if the seller says all the contingencies have been removed?
Like I said,
That's-
it's a little bit of a gray area.
So how do you cover that gray area then?
You,
You go through the
I
property.
mean, if
right
a
before the
hurricane
loan
comes through and
contingencies?
knocks it down, there's, but yeah.
What I'm saying is, for the most part, the seller would do its part. Most sellers are not like, oh my God, most
Yeah.
sellers are acting in their best interest to get the property sold. They don't want to go through lawsuits and.
Exactly. I mean, but that would be the course of action. You would have to go outside of the transaction and file something.
And what?
And file some sort of motion in the courts.
Okay,
get
after you to
compensation,
get
yeah.
compensation for whatever's. been-
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because once all those contingencies are removed, you essentially own the house.
I was wondering, like, as far as, like, for instance, like Paul Verdes, I saw on the news, like, the houses shift sometimes because it's on a hill.
Yeah,
If it were to shift, like, even like more, would that be like something you have to revise? Since it wasn't like technically in the same condition during like,
yeah, on something like that, I don't know, you would have been forewarned through the natural hazards
Yeah.
disclosure process that this hillside is moving. And you would have seen the results of any movement to the house prior to removing your contingencies. So.
So what does the final walkthrough cover. It's just,
You're, like I said, you're verifying that it's essentially the same condition that it was when you entered escrow.
oh,
So,
so then if it's not, you can get
yeah.
it.
So what is this? So again, post-close follow-up, using command. It's a great tool. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it. You can continue to send them newsletters, magazines. Have them follow you on Facebook and Instagram.
Mhm.
You guys aren't old enough to use Facebook, I don't think.
I am old enough.
I was on while I wasn't supposed to be.
And you know, checking in with proposals and just saying, hey, how's it going? Like, I mentioned I need to follow up with my old client whose daughter is working with me now. I haven't talked to him since his daughter got married, so I'm gonna call him and say, hey, congratulations, that's great.
Question for you.
Sure.
How do you build relationship with agent relationship? How do you build relationship with agents? What is the purpose of getting to know agents so well?
You mean your competitors?
Yeah, I'm confused because I'm confused how I'm supposed to build relationship with your business down.
Yeah, so there's two things mentioned here. Your business and your downline. When you go to make an offer, your name is going to be on there along with your buyer. And, you know, your reputation may precede you. So there's a lot of different variables when sellers are looking whether or not to accept an offer. And whether or not they have confidence in you as a professional to get this thing done. That is one of the things that people will take into consideration. So if they know you, if they've seen you at Brokers Opens, if they've seen you at other professional events, then that could be a plus in your column. You know? And in terms of downline, so at Keller Williams, we have this system where if you recruit somebody to Keller Williams and they say that you brought them here, then there's profit share involved with what the brokerage takes in. KW National.
Mhm.
So that's basically what that's. And there has been a lot of flux in the market, as we've seen lately. Most of it, most recently was within KW, with that one office closing. But if somebody gets unhappy at Remax or Compass, and you've been talking to them, and it's like, hey, come check us out, you know. I know when I first got started, I did not think that was a big deal. I wish I had invested more time in it,
In what?
in developing the downline.
Mhm.
Actually, met the last reimagine that has happened.
Yeah,
I met a lot of really interesting agents there.
yeah.
Like they're different insight of like their market or their area. We're just like we talking about all this good stuff.
You know, the information that you can gain, the education that you can gain from other individuals
Yeah.
in this industry, whether or not you're in the same office or the same market area, you know, if people are willing to talk to you, you should, and you should listen. And then you can evaluate whether or not they know what they're talking about.
I figure like it saves you a lot more time going over there and being there for years, and they've been there for years.
Yeah.
Give you a whole evaluation of their market.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you're going into a market that you don't know about. I had somebody, I was telling somebody about where I'm gonna be working, maybe looking for a home in Cypress, Lakewood, Los Alamitos area. And they're like, well, why did they hire you to do that? Like, because I'm a really good realtor. But She goes, well, do you know that? I go, I will, and I am familiar with those areas. Because as this market has been pricing people out, I know that a lot of people have looked there as their next opportunity.
Lakewood, Long Beach, I've noticed that too, yeah.
Yeah,
I have a part-time investor that flips houses, and as a rapid conversation with that agent. And it's been like, they've been flipping all over like that area.
yeah.
Constantly.
All right. I think that's it. Oh, wait, it's the daily success system. That's what you, how are your behaviors?
I was wondering, why do you think that is, like, everyone's kind of migrating towards like southeast?
Because it's more affordable. And they have pretty good school districts and it's more affordable.
I see.
Those are the main reasons. That I know. There may be others, but, everybody. Not everybody, but a majority of people want, if they're a family, they want a good school district. There are exceptions to that rule. I had one at an open house a few months back. In Redondo Beach, and I started to sell the place based on the school district. And the lady laughed at me. She's like, we are not sending our kids to public school. I'm like, what? Even if you don't send your kids there, it's gonna add value to your home.
You don't send them to Redondo?
Yeah,
Wow,
she
that's
wasn't
a
gonna
really
send
good
them there.
school,
She was gonna homeschool. But, all right, well, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna go back online. If there is anybody still online. Let's see how we get this here. Hey, we do still have a few.
We're here.
Okay. Do you have any comments, questions, anything I rushed through that you didn't get? Or questions that you were hoping to have answered that I haven't?
No, I think we got it. Thank you.
Okay,
The takeaway that really stuck with me is to set expectations and communicate throughout the process so we get to the close.
that is a great takeaway, and I'm sorry that it took us 2 hours to convey that.
No, there was a lot more too. This is just the one that
Yeah.
really, stuck with me.
But yeah, it's something that we have to keep in mind all the time, expectations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina, for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
Yuki, Alicia, Jamie, any comments? No?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much. It's been a good class.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
All right, well, you guys have a great day. If you come by the office, I'm here. I'm in the corner right next to Fred, so if you have questions, knock on my door. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
How do you find this real
Thank
minor?
you.
Thank you, Joe.